Afternoon class, my name is Andrew Grotti. We're going to go ahead and start going over our Benchmark Lab 5, Challenge Your Hacking Skills. So for this one, we had our Metasploit box in Kali Linux, so we went ahead and organized and performed penetration tests for the Metasploit 2 virtual machine. Going to give you kind of a brief summary of why penetration tests are valuable for organizations, as well as describe how you should handle failures and following procedures. So obviously first thing was first, installed my Metasploit 2, created the virtual machine for it, as well as making sure that the virtual machine was on a bridge network. Once that was done, was able to make sure my Linux and Metasploit machines were able to see each other. So pen testing is helpful because what this is going to do is when you do this with organizations, it helps show leadership and even higher shareholders certain vulnerabilities or maybe specific things that could be needed for updating or hardening. And this helps to show an overall possibility of future events of a what-if scenario. The nice thing with penetration testing, it can be more or less a controlled environment because you obviously know the red team or that organization or agency you're using for that pen test. This comes with multiple days of legal documentation, MOUs, NSAs, service letter agreements to make sure that they know their left and right limits, and they know what's actually in play and what they can and can't do on your guys' network. When it comes to failing, regardless of a good or bad score or organizations finding multiple sources of vulnerabilities, things that are out of date, out of place, one wouldn't think of it as failing, but actually knowing that rather than kind of belittling them team or thinking that they're out of line, it gives them a good open look of a third-person view of like, hey, look, this is what needs to get fixed. These are what can be taken care of and looked to in the future in order to prevent those types of attacks from occurring. Also gives your higher-ups a great idea of what currently is being done and the good and bad out of both teams. So part 2, we're going to be utilizing some of our scans we've been learning throughout the class. So Nmap, Nikto scan, OWASP, and then Nessus. So went ahead and just ran my Nessus scan running on 192.168.56.0-24, identifying my Metasploit as my 192.168.56.104. Continued through running a few other different ones, just looking to see specific states of ports and services that were being ran. Moving on to the Nikto scan, once again knowing that my host was 56.104. Finding specific vulnerabilities already showing for different servers and also showing the Apache 2.234, EOL for 2.x branch, HTTP trace methods active. Moving on to the OWASP scan, once again showing vulnerability to the JS library, cookies without the same site attributes, private IP disclosure, cross-site scripting, and a few different the options for header missing that we were able to kind of also look into, as well as the missing anti-clicking clickjacking header. And then our Nessus scan that also showed these specific vulnerabilities that we saw and found. So things I would do or things that I would implement is going to your cross-site, your x-xss protecting and header was missing. Thus, any page could be at risk for cross-site scripting attacks. HTTPX protection response header in a future Internet Explorer, Chrome, or Safari would stop pages from loading when they detect reflected cross-site scripting attacks. Cross-content type options header missing, so missing the cross-frame options header means this website could be at risk for a clickjacking attack. The X-Framework options HTTP header filed indications a policy that specific whether the browser should render transmitted resources frame or an iframe. HTTP responder header X-Frame options is an optional feature that can be set in websites in the server configuration files. Some other countermeasures to mitigate I propose in order to protect the site against cross-source scripting projects missing. Escape user input. Escape means to convert the key characters I data a web page previews to prevent the data from being interrupted in any malicious way. And validate users' input and sanitize data. I also propose in order to protect against cross-content type option header missing, it would be a double-clicked HTTP response header icon and a feature list in the middle. this icon plane on the right side, click Add, and in the dialog box it appears. Type X-Frame Options in the name field, type same origin in the same value field. Click OK and save your changes. So different strategies to establish mitigation of vulnerabilities identified in your scans. So once again, just kind of knowing the scans you're doing and the possibility of attacks that you can have done to your systems. So same for the policies, in which designed to segregate different websites from each other, which will thus harden the system. Other ways to reduce risk in hardened systems would be keeping patches up to date. Hardening the systems always will occur with a good practice of knowing and having good patch cycles and systems occurring. Accept many types of web resources by examining content or response instead of relying on content type headers. This also may just be done by setting up maybe like reoccurring nested scans that you can then take into your other team that, if it's not the same, that does patching to keep those continuously updated. So once logging into your Kali Linux, you can also begin making those needed changes within the Metasploit framework. So changes made of what I would do is with cross type options header missing, protection headers missing since it only is about configurations, as well as host names not matching certificate names. So cost and criticality of these are more or less just time and research for your IT or your engineers so it can be doing these updates. Expedience would be trying to speed it up as fast as possible and make sure those deadlines are set. Some lessons learned even on the biggest organizations during these systems hardening, why that's important. You want to make sure that you're not having comprehensive information security plans or an up-to-date is a big no. So having a good network map and understanding who and why specific domains or maybe colleagues, organizations that you work with, what happens with those effects when they get onto your network. Looking at hardening as a business issue is not an IT issue. So businesses, depending on your type of team you have, your manager may not know anything about cyber. He may know everything, and he may not know anything. So being able to educate and explain to those higher ups in your hierarchies of the importance of what is important, of why this business would be concerned, rather than, oh, just the IT team can fix it and solve it. Having false hopes on an obsolete perimeter protection strategy versus data-centric strategy. So keeping up with the times and just knowing how to make sure that that data is being used properly. Ingesting it in the correct SIM, parsing it the correct ways, that way it's standardized and systematic and clean to see across the way. Relying on third-party cyber vendors or MSSPs or antivirus. I always like to say you want to have fingers on keys and eyes on screens. You always can't just take the chances of a specific system or tool that you're using to feel that you're safe in bed and you don't have to worry about anything touching or getting across your system. It's always nice to have that human interaction with that stuff to kind of cross-check those automatic or automated systems that are already put into place. And then understanding failure to understand threats of an insider threat or current cyber threats being used. Keeping up to date with everything, whether that's news articles, doing dark web research, being part of blogs or specific channels, GitHub, Reddit, Stack Overflow, and just keeping up with those times of things that are coming through. So once again, guys, really appreciate your time. I'll see you guys on week 7.